fellow travelers, and welcome to another episode of Verta Stars Podcast 4th season. My loyal listeners, thank you for continued support. Enjoy this amazing interview because John Callen boards the mothership. You know him from the Hobbit trilogy of films. Now come aboard as we go traversing the stars. Hi, Mr. Callen. Thank you for coming to Verta Stars Podcast.
Indeed, and looking forward to what we're going to discuss.
Yeah, like I said, I'm a big fan. I love the Hobbit trilogy, so it's a great honor to have you on the show. I always
Thank
have a
you.
question of inspiration to inspire your love for acting and who your earliest influences.
Okay. When I was very young, 5 or 6 years old, I was required to be in a nativity play. And just for a few minutes, I had one line, 4 words, I bring thee gold. And it was really interesting being on the other side of things. I used to watch little Punch and Judy shows when I was a kid, and that was an introduction to family violence, of course, and violence towards animals, which at the time just struck me as being a bit of good fun.
Mhm.
Um, I had my years up until I just turned 16 in London, where I was born, and my parents took me to the theatre in London and took me to some pretty good shows. Took me to musicals. There was a pantomime on ice that I remember, and also some other plays, most of them lightweight, I have to say. Now, when I say most of them, we weren't a wealthy family. My father was from working class background and was pulling himself up the income ladder, if you like, and a really charming man. And then to the Royal Albert Hall, where I was taken to listen to some of Tchaikovsky's music, including the 1812 Overture. And my goodness me, that just, oh, I just loved it to bits. My father, I guess, became something of an economic, um, an economic traveller, shall we say, to New Zealand. He had been here during the Second World War and he loved it. So if you're talking about early influences, my father was one of them. He wasn't an
Mhm.
actor. And to be honest, I don't think he wanted me to be an actor either. He wanted me to be an engineer or an architect. And I loved and still do love architecture. So he was a huge influence, and the influence of British comedy in the theatre had got me going. So there we are.
Fans know you as Oyen from the Hobbit trilogy. What some of them may not know is that you also have a very rich film, television, and theater background as well, especially Shakespearean plays. You've been Macbeth, Shylock, and Claudius. So can you kind of give me a little bit on how that education in Shakespearean theater and film and other television helped you best inhabit your character in The Hobbit?
Hobbit was certainly the biggest gig I've done. We filmed for a year and a half, had 6 months off, and there was another 6 months after that. Not that I was needed for all of that final period. Um, I had read the book when I was young. I had to reread it because I didn't remember Oin. And so what the director did was he said, why don't you talk with your brother, Peter Hambleton, who played Gloin, and just have a chat about things that you might want to bring to it. So your question is very much a question like he was asking. Um, if I think about acting, um, it's a two-way thing. When one is working in theatre, the fact that there are live human beings right there across the footlights, as it were,
Mm.
um, just lifts the challenge somewhat. So going into doing a film like this, my concern was really that being the oldest of the actors playing the dwarves by about 9 years, I think, um, was challenging. There were times when the physicality was challenging, but in terms of the influence of theatre on what I was doing, um, if you're performing and just simply doing an interview like this has a performance element about it,
Mm.
what I found was that the closest thing really was, believe it or not, Shylock.
Mm.
Shylock was a character who I found to be, uh, yes, really put upon. His ethnicity was always in question. And even Shakespeare had written the character as a nasty, venal piece of work. With somebody like Claudius, he again, a very selfish man, selfish to the point of marrying his dead brother's wife. I mean, for goodness sake, um, such things may happen, but it's a challenge. Oin is mentioned 3 or 4 times in the book, very briefly, as a firelighter. And what our esteemed director suggested was that that means we really have a blank canvas. So the whole idea of him being the medic and carrying that bag full of ointments and things like that. In fact, it was suggested by Peter Jackson, that Oin actually gave his name to the invention of ointments, which I thought was quite good. So look, to cut a long story short, every job you do informs everything else henceforth.
Mm.
And so you can take all the things that you have learnt, whether they are the simple practicalities of how do I learn these lines, to what shoes does this person wear? Because that can make a huge difference to how one carries oneself, and the way one carries oneself makes a big difference to how one is perceived, if you like. I hope that answers your
Yes.
question.
And I think one of the things that's also unique to performing in The Hobbit, as you mentioned, the amount of time, how many shooting days there were overall making the trilogy, because they were the way they were being shot. Now, well, often when you shoot TV or film, you are shooting within a shorter period of time than The Hobbit did. Um, is there ever a danger of becoming bored with your character or getting too comfortable with your character? And how did you fight that feeling?
Um, that's a very good question. The simple answer is no, I didn't get bored with the character at all. I didn't get bored with the shooting process at all. I did get bored with the waiting.
Mm,
They they say, I don't know if it's the same in the US, that the entire industry is run on the catchphrase "hurry up and wait," which I believe came from the military somewhere.
mm,
However, it was very, very true. And there were days where I think the earliest call I ever had was something like 3 o'clock in the morning pickup, 3:30. Mostly I was required to be at the studio in the morning, and shooting usually started round about 8 a.m. So one would go in, get hair, makeup, costume done over that period. For me, it started out as 2.5, 2 3/4 hours. The longer we did it, the more familiar
mm.
the makeup costume people became. And for me, that came down to about 2 hours. And I always found it a wonderful time to have a chat with people about things that weren't what we were doing.
Mm.
Um, and then, so we had to hurry up and wait. And sometimes we were waiting because other scenes were being shot. Sometimes we were waiting because the esteemed director was making decisions about things, which meant that changes, developments had to occur before we were called.
Mm.
There was one day I recall where every single one of us dwarves was all made up in costume, sent to our individual trailers. We waited for an entire day and weren't used.
Mm.
So
That's-
clearly they were working on other things. The following day, one of the producers had put a very nice bottle of red wine in the trailer of each of those actors who was affected, and that became something that continued. I don't know how much that man spent, whether it came out of his budget or his pocket, but I can tell you it was greatly appreciated. Um, so that kind of thing was tedious. I've got all sorts of photos in my phone here, like most people that will never see the light of day, of actors lying there absolutely exhausted and yes, just like my image in front of you now, going in and out of focus somewhat.
Mm.
Pictures of us in, we got so hot. They had tents with air conditioning in them. And what a lot of people don't know is that the costumes had um, special vests, which are like the vests that racing car drivers use.
Oh.
And the racing car drivers have them plugged into circulating water to keep them cool. We had those attached to what we call a chili bin,
Mm.
basically a plastic picnic bin that you would use to keep your beer and your sandwiches cool. And a little fan was in the water so that when we were hot and bothered and we came off set, we could say, "Can you plug me in, please?" And we would get this tube that was attached to them, plug it into the chili bin with the ice water, and almost immediately, oh, was just the most wonderful feeling because those costumes were very heavy indeed, and very thick, made of wool and leather. And I didn't have hands. I tried it, but I have some arthritis. And I find even now sometimes when I just pick up a cup, I have to use two hands to do it or
Mm.
put it in the other hand. And I never know when it's going to hit me. Just getting dressed yesterday, I pulled my thumb back and my goodness, it hurt for an hour and a half.
Oh, wow.
So that meant that I couldn't wear the fake hands that all the other actors had. So they made me gloves, which was great, except every now and then things would slip through the wool because they were wool. They weren't artificial fibers. So very hot, very heavy, and having the plug-in ice cold water. It was like the reverse feeling that you might have had as a child of wetting the bed, where you ended up damp and warm.
Now, when you're talking about, you had a blank slate, right, to develop your character, and with the search of Peter Jackson, one thing that's unique to your character is the horn that you had to to
Oh,
help
yes.
adjust it. So,
Yeah.
how did that come about? Whose idea was it? How did you implement it into your scenes?
Uh, it came about really along in the discussions that Peter Hambleton and I had, which in themselves were quite entertaining. I don't know if you've ever seen Ricky Gervais's series Extras. Um, well, look for it. It was done in England, so it's got very English comedy in it. But while we were going through that, I was personally going through a difficult period with my hearing,
Mm.
and I had hearing aids. And I said to Peter that it might be interesting to have uh, have a hearing issue. And I'm glad we did that because that alone gave me a little bit more to hang on to, a little
Mm.
bit more character. and a few more lines than I might otherwise have had. Some of what each of us said in the film wasn't necessarily in the script, you understand.
Hmm.
Um, it may be now, but uh, so that's where the hearing thing came from. And the hearing horn, the hearing trumpet was fabulous. I had about 13, 14 of them in the course of the uh, film. And at the end, I just said to Peter Jackson, could I grab one as a souvenir? And I took one. And the one that I took had been copied by the sound department, and they had printed it on the back of their particular sound department team's T-shirts, one of which I still have with me.
You had the 13 dwarfs, including yourself, on set, in a scene. Sometimes Bilbo Baggins as well. Sometimes Gandalf is in it as well, which is basically 15 actors on camera at times any given time. Now, sometimes you're the focus, sometimes you're not. How do you handle that kind of ensemble? Is it difficult to act in background as well as within, because now you got to determine what you're doing when you're not necessarily being concentrated, but sometimes obviously you are as well.
That's an interesting question, and the first thing that springs to mind is a stage piece I was in many years ago, where I had a middle-sized role in the particular production. The director was a man from Northern England who had a fabulous accent. I ended up adoring this man. He was so talented, and he wrote fiction books, fantasy, what do you call them? Anyway, kind of fantasy historical things.
Okay.
And at one point in this production, I just said to him, uh, "Sorry, I'm not quite sure what I'm meant to be doing in this scene," because the action was downstage and I was upstage and I was there, but I wasn't doing much. And he said, "Well, you and Ewan Upston, the other actor who was with me upstage," he said, uh, "Oh, John, just stay up the back there and just prat around for a bit." Prat around for a bit just means you're making an awful lot of fuss doing nothing, basically. And so we were doing little things, like touching each other's collars, just pulling that straight, and then we would rearrange what was on the table and all that. And after a little while, the director came back to us. Phil Mann was his name, a wonderful writer, and he just said, uh, "John, Ewan, can you not prat around anymore, please? Thank you." So when we were doing the Hobbit thing, I thought to myself, uh, go back to the book, think about the book. The character I was playing was not dominant in the story. May have been essential. Maybe they would have all frozen to death if I hadn't been good at lighting a fire, but we didn't actually see much of that in the film.
Hmm.
Um, but having a little bit of freedom meant that there were certain lines. One that I invented there on the spot was when we were fighting some giant nasties, and the Hobbit decided, no, no, you don't want to eat our friends because they're all infected. They've got parasites. And on the spur of the moment, I just yelled out, "Parasites! I've got parasites the size of my arm." And blow me down, it ended up in the film. Um, so there you go. Because the character was less dominant than others, didn't in any way affect my ego. It didn't in any way mean I was trying to push forward to get to the front of what was going on.
Hmm.
Um, that is something that I've come across, and I don't think anybody else likes people
Hmm.
doing that kind of thing. There is story to be told. Let's just tell it.
The Hobbit trilogy is shot on location in New Zealand, but there also was a lot of CGI involved as well. And I know famously in the documentaries, McKellen had some difficulty wanting to be dealing with the CGI. For you, how did you handle dealing with that level of CGI within your scenes?
Um, Sometimes it was really interesting to see how there were different ways of shooting things that we knew would have a CGI content. Um, and there was yes, there was the big green ball on the end of a stick.
Mm.
And we were frequently looking at that rather than at the actor who was that much taller. There was one scene in Bayon's house where we were in with the animals, and we knew that these animals would be looking so much bigger than us. And Ian McKellen was walking around on a platform that went, in different directions through the scene
Mm.
so that we could look up to him. And we knew that that was going to be stripped away. But there was Ian, standing rather higher than us. And if he had fallen off those platforms, it would have been us he fell on. Um, Look, the technicalities of film have grown exponentially, certainly in the 21st century. Just extraordinary bits of work are being done, and I admire the talent. When I was in Wellington, where all the shooting, or most of the shooting in the studios anyway, took place, I was put up in some accommodation that was next door to a man who worked as a CGI artist. And we had been invited to go and see one of the films about, it was one of the Planet of the Apes series of
Mm.
films.
Love those films.
Yes, and I came out of my door into the lift, and this younger man came in. Mind you, most men are younger than me now. Um, uh, and he said, "Oh, I think I've seen your face. Where are you off to?" And I told him, and he said, "Oh, yes, me too." And I said, "Oh, what do you do on it?" He said, "I work CGI. I spent 12 months painting in CGI the hairs of an orange orangutan."
That is
So
awesome.
there you go. I couldn't do that. It would drive me round the bend. I haven't got the patience.
Well, I mean, with an actor, especially a stage actor, you're acting, and for most actors, my understanding is the idea is that you're reacting to the person you're acting against. It's your job to kind of anticipate and react. CGI, you can't anticipate, can't react. How does that change your philosophy of your performance?
Um, I don't think it does. I don't think it can. I don't think it should.
Hmm.
Um, Being on stage with other actors is a gift, and it's a wonderful treasure to maintain. And sometimes things don't work out so well. And sometimes they are so uplifting. And so I have tried through my career to carry that kind of connection through. Working on an English film a few years ago, I think just about 12 months before The Hobbit started shooting. And there I was working with an actress who I had admired. We only had a couple of small scenes to do together, but I thought, here is this woman who is well known. Don't ask me her name, please. And uh, here she is at the bottom of the world, working with me, a jobbing actor who's done some stage work and a few bits in films, that kind of thing. And I thought, and she's not the kind of person who was up herself and, all that kind of carry on. She was
Hmm.
fantastic to work with. As soon as they said, okay, roll up, bang. she was who she was playing.
Mm.
So, there was a lesson there too in terms of saying, don't think about playing this character, just switch, be there, be in it. And all the technology that is used these days, um, all the technical painting, if you like, is wonderful, is fabulous. Such talented people do it. It shouldn't change anything at all
Mm.
about what's going on in your head and your heart. Those are the two things that matter most.
Well, to the actors I'm sure everyone's wondering about is what was McKellen and Martin Freeman like to act with on during the Hobbit trilogy?
Fantastic. Ian and I sadly didn't have any interactive dialogue, but we were in a few scenes together. He is a dear, sweet man. And yes, the lovely actor who was the Hobbit. I remember before we had shot anything, we had a press conference and there were lots of questions coming. And you mentioned the language. Now, there we were, and I got a lovely surprise when we were asked about, the characters we were playing, the roles we were doing, and they came to him and asked him, and he said, "It's it's amazing, it's wonderful. I am the fucking Hobbit." And I thought, okay, well, if you want to bleep that, you
No,
can.
definitely not.
So, those kind of things. Yeah, it was great working with them. Both of them, very, very intelligent human beings, talented actors, understand comedy, understand humanity, and understand what is important, again, in the head and in the heart.
Mm,
And that the Hobbit films, I think, even more than the Lord of the Rings, were about heart.
mm.
And to be honest, the first of those three films had so much heart in it, and we all carried that with us. And people ask me, what was the best thing about being in that series of films? And I can say it was the camaraderie that
Mm.
developed through the heart of what we were all doing.
I mean, the Hobbit trilogy and the Lord of the Rings trilogy are basically milestones in the world of fantasy, especially or even drama and filmmaking. For the Hobbit, why do you think that trilogy is so beloved? It is that milestone in of filmmaking. What made that so special?
Uh, Initially, have you heard of a writer called T.H. White? He wrote a series of books. There was a trilogy called The Once and Future King, and the
Hmm.
original of those three books was The Sword in the Stone. And it was, again, about a diminutive person, a child, in fact, in that book, and Merlin. So here we are, we've got a parallel already with somebody small and somebody who is incredibly fantastic, just as, you've got Merlin and you've got Gandalf, and you've got the boy child who is going to be king.
Hmm.
And Merlin takes him to all sorts of places to see how the fish survive by working in shoals, how the geese survive by going in formats that change as they're flying so that no one person has to carry a bigger load than anybody else. And then he takes Arthur to the world of the ants, and the ants live by one rule, and that is that everything which is not forbidden is compulsory. And I thought to myself, that book came out in the same year that The Hobbit came out.
Hmm.
In the book, the ants are the black ants. In the book of The Hobbit, we have got these innocents. Certainly he, the Hobbit, was an innocent, going through with Gandalf, and they are doing the same thing. They are discovering what works in life, what the sacrifices might mean, might be. And in their case, they're fighting orcs who appear as black creatures, if you like, who have a black language. And what I saw there was a parallel uh, politically of what was going on at the time in Europe with the rise of the fascists, the brown shirts, the Italian black shirts. And I thought, and I used this argument in a discussion at one of the Hobbit cons, where a very earnest young lady was using the Hobbit as a study piece, and she was heading towards a doctorate. And she asked me what I thought the political message was. And so I quoted what I've just told you. And I said, really, what was happening was a recognition of the growing evil that was coming out of Germany at the time. And both these writers recognizing the dangers that were there and were trying to lead us through an understanding
Mm,
of where things might go, where they could go, and that we needed to maintain our heart.
mm.
And yeah, so I got a lovely standing ovation from 2,000 people for that,
Nice.
and yet I had made that up on the spur of the moment. But I think that is a very, very
Mm.
apposite kind of argument anyway. Other people in the cast would just come in and say, "Oh, for God's sake, John, shut up." But there we go.
That is awesome. So what is next for you?
Um, who knows? I'm going today to go from here to Wellington, where all the shooting took place. I hope to catch up with a couple of people who were involved in that. But yes, my son is having his birthday, and so I don't want to miss that. And he lives down there with his sister and her partner. So I'm heading down there for that. I am three-quarters of the way through recording an audio book. I do a lot of voice work at the moment. Couple of auditions I've done recently. I am winding down, and for the last 2 or 3 years, mainly I think because of this rather than anything else, I have played a very nasty Santa Claus in a series of short sketches and films and things like that. So one simply never knows what's coming next.
Anytime you want, Mr. Callen, please come back on the show. You're awesome. Like I said, I love The Hobbit. I think you're fantastic. And like I said, anytime you want to talk about anything, come right back on the show, sir.
Well, it's very, very kind of you to say so, and I'm very happy to chat about myself anytime.
Appreciate it. Have a fantastic trip and be safe.
Yes, and lots of love to all the people who keep the magic alive by watching the film and reading the book again and again. Fabulous.